response until you grow tired of it and you let it go, and the rational mind comes back. So at different times, those two minds are clashing, but they're never there at the same time. Never. No way. No, you can't go like, when you're angry, or rational, and maybe back, forth. It can alternate, but they can never be there at the same time. That's our difficulty, that rational mind, that needs to be now brought onto a more emotional level. Okay? That rational understanding, in other words, that understanding needs to deepen. So it's not just an intellectual understanding, but it becomes part of your own experience. And then, when there's an insult, that mind sets in and goes, it just seems to be an insult, but it's not an insult. That second makes the difference between being angry for the next hour or not getting angry at all. Okay? Sometimes it's just a matter of counting to 5, like the Japanese do. I've been told that when they face a situation that would potentially make them angry, the problem is there is like no break, and I'm angry. No, just take a moment, like, leave it, count to 5. And you lose the momentum. You lose the force of the mind, and you may still catch up again, that's possible, but oftentimes you lose that moment and the whole story doesn't evolve that way, okay?
Spårad esse.
Huh?
Spårad esse. Count until 10, we say in Hebrew.
You do?
Count in esse.
We don't.
Oh, but we never do. You say that, but nice. That's good. Someone really understood how anger works there. Whoever came up.
They stop at 3.
Okay, great. All right. Now let me just make sure this is still in your interest, because I'm trying to say only what the Dalai Lama is saying here. So some parts, of course, here he talks about parts, examining consciousness. All right. Okay, so excuse me for that. Appreciating the reasoning of dependent arising. Well, I hope we've been appreciating the reasoning of dependent arising. So a whole separate from its parts, like a whole is just labeled on the basis of parts. So usually when we say a table, it's just another word for a whole, not H-O-L-E, but W-H-O-L-E, right? A whole based on part. It's just another word for a whole. So just as you can't find a whole, am I pronouncing it right?
Yeah.
Does it make sense the way I say it? Whole?
Yeah.
Is it pronounced the same as like the whole? Yeah. H-O-L-E?
The same.
In America.
Okay. All right. Okay. Then, anyway, so therefore, the whole, I can call it a whole, and I can't find a whole. So in the same way, I can't find a laptop, which is just another word I give on the basis of the parts of a laptop, for instance, or a table. Okay. And then he talks about emptiness does not mean nothingness, of course. The flower. Oh yes, there was something with the flower. Here's the flower. Better put that back. So, the shape of the flower, the color of the stem, as if there was a flower that possesses these qualities or parts. It seems like that above and beyond us just calling it that, there's an actual object that holds these parts. Okay? That's what it feels to a certain mind, not to the intellectual mind, but this other mind, this deeper mind, that controls our feelings. Okay? All right, so there's scientific tools that describe that. And even the Buddha himself doesn't exist in such a way. So actually when we analyze, we look, we engage in ultimate analysis and we look for something beyond. It's called ultimate analysis. When we analyze, is this a cup, is this a glass? That's just ordinary analysis, where we maybe compare two things. That's a different type of analysis. Ultimate analysis means I don't compare two objects, for instance. I take the cup itself and look for the cup within the cup. Where is the cup? And I don't find it. Okay? That's when the Dalai Lama in the beginning said even scientists, when you look closer at an object, it starts disappearing. And there are a lot of analysis for that. They say the objects around us, they're like mirages of water. Like a mirage, like a Fata Morgana. I think that's what you call it in Hebrew, right? Fata Morgana. So Fata Morgana, from afar, it seems to be water. Okay? But the closer you get to it, the less it appears as water. So likewise, inherent existence, from afar, it appears to be inherently existent. From afar means without analyzing. But when we engage in this analysis, where is the cup? It starts disappearing. Because we're actually looking for something inside this object, within the object. And since it was merely labeled, and we're not looking for the labeling, because the labeling depends on the mind. We look for something here from the side of the object, we don't find anything. Maybe a modern example, other than Fata Morgana, like something where the closer you get, the more you kind of zoom into the object, the more it disappears, would be like pixels on the computer screen. Right? Right? It seems very vivid from afar, and the better the computer, the more vivid it seems. But when you go closer and closer and closer and closer, it disappears. Same is true for atoms. Right? When you go like with a zoom into something, what seemed so solid previously, suddenly it's just atoms. And then it's just space. Right? That's on a physical level. But in Buddhism, there's nothing there to be found from the side of the object when it engages in ultimate analysis. So you see, there's great similarity to science, actually. Quantum physics again. And it depends on an observer, on a mind, to label it, to make it a... Does that make sense? All right, so now I'm thinking what meditation we're going to do. It'll be a little bit over time, but we start a little bit later. I hope that's all right. Okay. Like long when there's short. When there's this, that arises. Like long when there's short. Due to the production of this, that is produced. So that's dependent on causes and conditions. Okay? And long and short, it's dependence on part. In relation to something else, it is this, that, and the other. Right? Okay. So, anyway, I feel I've basically addressed a lot of these ideas of at least dependent arising. Emptiness, of course, we discussed. Tomorrow we'll be more specific with regard to the traditional meditations on emptiness, on what is the I, looking for the I, just in the way described here. But this was the part, basically, now I don't want to hold you up, but it feels like I've covered basically the first 100 pages. I'll go over them tonight again, make sure I didn't leave anything that I find important, that may be difficult. I made notes in here, so hopefully I'll come across anything. If you come across something, please bring it up. Because this book, I shouldn't say it's your Bible from now on. No. But it's like, if you want to find out more about selflessness and emptiness, this is a brilliant book. It's a brilliant book. There are books that are more difficult, such as Nagarjuna's Fundamental Wisdom, right? Very difficult, 27 pages of just 27 chapters of just difficult reasoning. But this is a very good way to kind of to allow you to get into the subject matter, get a good foundation, and then you can take it further from here. Danny?
I'm struggling because I'm waiting for you to mention the skandhas, but more in terms of the fact that if you look at a more fundamental level, beyond the atoms that you're mentioning,
yes,
you'll probably find a process in the case of strings going beneath the course.
A process?
Right. So when you look at everything being a process and dependent arising, and it analyzing itself, in my mind anyway, I look at the process of the five skandhas, and there's also helpful.
Oh, great. Well, you see, like, everyone has a slightly different way of understanding this better. So you mentioned another way. The more traditional, of course, meditation is when you look at the five aggregates and you look for the self. So, as I said, we'll approach this more tomorrow. We get into this more tomorrow, but might as well mention it. Well, Danny is bringing in the idea, or the not just the idea, but the fact that when we say I, that is just a label we give to what is called the 5 aggregates. Now, without explaining each of the aggregates, that would take up too much time, but the 5 aggregates is just another way of saying mind and body, with the body being one aggregate and the mind being described from the point of view of being four types of mind, if you like, okay? A way of dividing the mind in 4 different types. So without describing those 5, he's basically saying mind and body is actually just a process. So he's not thinking of mind, he's not just taking mind and body in one moment, but actually taking into consideration the impermanent nature of mind and body, which, why are they impermanent? Because they're going through a process of one moment giving rise to the next, giving rise to the next, functioning in a certain way, interacting with the environment. Like, mind and body are not something solid, not something unchanging, not something frozen in time, but rather they go through a process. They go through a constant process of change and acting, interacting. But and they're actually the basis labeled on which we describe the I. We label the I on the basis of that, but then believe into a solid I, even a permanent I at times. At times it seems to even appear as permanent. So the absurdity of that view becomes more obvious in the way Danny describes it. Like mind and body, it's really just, it's a process, if you like. But process, really mind and body, the mind and the body engage in activities, okay, in the process of activities, and labeled on which we call it a body and a mind, right? There's an activity that takes place, labeled on which, based on which we then label body and mind. So even the mind and the body are also just labeled on the basis of parts other than themselves, but even more so a whole process. So he brings that in. I've only just talked about the parts that are there in each moment. He brings in a continuum with each moment being slightly differently and therefore creating a process. The mind is this, the I is the same. It's just labeled, and conventionally we could say it's a process, okay? It's like within moments of time of an I, a conventional I, we then call that the I. I mean, yesterday's I, today's I, tomorrow's I. They're all different I's, but we call it I. Okay? And so we call it the same, because why should we use for each second a different name? That makes it more complicated. But then we believe it's just one single thing. Okay, that's our mistake. So then is that in any way? Probably, I didn't probably explain it the way you would like me to, but that's all right. Unfortunately, it's something subjective.
It's okay, we're under.
No, but I'm sure this is why just hearing one person talk about is not enough. Except that's just my job for now. But you should listen to other explanations, other people explaining it. Every time you hear it, also other people explaining it differently, and it affects you differently, and hopefully, if you allow it to go deeper, it will go deeper. Okay, and then understanding, better intellectual understanding, and eventually you take it to a more emotional level when it actually affects you. Okay. All right, great. Now, let's do a meditation to bring everything together. We've done today. Let's start off again, just quietening the mind through mindfulness. Did we take a break?
Oh, no, I'm just moving.
So, all right, talking about mindfulness. To let go of any disruptive thoughts, to just calm the mind down, a few moments of breathing. And then I just mention some of the ideas we've discussed for you to analyze them. And at the end, focus again on whatever conclusion you've come to. So as before, bring to mind your sense of I. If it's hard to get hold of that, of the object, the I, think of a time when you're extremely pleased, or fearful, or embarrassed. Which are emotional states that have a strong sense of I. So in the same way as we may feel that wetness is inherent in water, in heat and fire, there's an instinctive sense that there's an inherent I found in mind and body. A soul, a self, or an I. It seems to have its own mode of existence in that it's independent. It doesn't need anything to exist. It just is. That appearance to the mind as an inherent I is unrealistic, since the I is a dependently arisen phenomenon. First of all, it's dependent on causes and conditions. Our present I wouldn't be there if it wasn't for numerous external causes. As well as numerous internal causes. Conventional I is dependent on culture, our upbringing, our religion, political situation, material development, and so forth. It's also dependent on the food we eat. And the changes in our body. And the thoughts and ideas we have. So if the conventional I existed inherently the way it appears, none of those external or internal factors could have in any way affected us. not only is the conventional I dependent on countless causes and conditions, it's also dependent on different parts, different qualities, characteristics, functions, and so forth. It's dependent on the body, and the functions the body performs. And it's dependent on the 5 sense consciousnesses. Perceive shape, color, sounds, smells, and so forth. And the mental consciousness, the thinking mind, it's making sense of what we perceive with our sense consciousnesses.